Greetings and welcome to Voice of Sankofa. Jehovah's Witness has an active presence in most countries and is considered one of the most racially diverse Christian denominations. According to a Pew Research study, Jehovah's Witnesses have an extremely large number of blacks and Latinos in their congregations compared to other U.S. religious groups. Over many decades, this denomination has seen a lot of controversy and backlash about their beliefs and practices. So this led me to do some extensive digging into the history of Jehovah's Witness, and needless to say, I found a lot of hidden truths and shocking facts that aren't being talked about, let alone revealed to the masses. So, in today's video, I'm revealing the hidden truth behind Jehovah's Witness. Here is a small background about Jehovah's Witness. It is a Christian denomination that was the outgrowth of the Bible student movement founded by Charles Taze Russell in the 19th century. And after his death, Joseph Franklin Rutherford, also known as J.R. Rutherford, retained control of the Watchtower Society and its properties. Jehovah's Witnesses reject Jesus as a part of the Holy Trinity, the inherent immortality of the soul, and hellfire, which they consider unscriptural doctrines. The denomination is directed by a group known as the Governing Body of Jehovah's Witnesses, which establishes all doctrines. Controversy about various beliefs, doctrines, and practices of Jehovah's Witnesses has led to opposition from governments, communities, and other religious groups. These are demographics of Jehovah's Witness members, and this information comes from Wikipedia. There are approximately 8.8 million members in about 119,000 congregations worldwide, and is considered to be the most racially diverse Christian denomination. JW members had the lowest average household income, with approximately half of Witness households in the U.S. earning less than $30,000 per year. JW has been met with a lot of criticism. The Jehovah's Witness movement leaders have been accused of practicing doctrinal inconsistencies and making doctrinal reversals, making failed predictions, mistranslating the Bible, harshly treating former Jehovah's Witnesses, and leading the Jehovah's Witness movement in an authoritarian and coercive manner. Jehovah's Witness has been described as a cult with strict rules and regulations on how members should conduct themselves, and are potentially subjected to expulsion from the faith if not obedient. Here's some more information that I found regarding the criticism of JW. Jehovah's Witness leaders discourage secular education with a video on the Watchtower organization website warning members of the ways higher education can erode religious beliefs and values. They practice shunning or disfellowshipping, which involves isolating individuals who are deemed to have violated their beliefs or standards. They have complementary view of women, where only men may hold positions of authority, such as ministerial servant or elder. Their policies for handling cases of child sexual abuse have been the subject of various formal inquiries. There has been cover-ups of sexual abuse claims of children by JW leadership. So where does this religious organization get its funding? Well, it comes from its members, the same members who on average were the lowest household earners in the U.S., earning less than $30,000 per year. And this information comes from Wikipedia. In 2001, Newsday listed the Watchtower Society as one of New York's 40 richest corporations, with revenues exceeding $950 million. Churches are big businesses. The church business is run pretty much entirely on tithes and donations. Church revenue statistics show that in 2024, religious organizations in the U.S. are expected to make around $130 billion in total revenue. There are many false prophets who go into the church for monetary gains rather than religious stewardship, as I'll show in the upcoming slides. Here is Charles T. Russell, founder of the Bible student movement that transitioned to today's Jehovah's Witness. Charles Taze Russell, born in 1852, was an American Adventist minister from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the founder of the Bible student movement. He lectured on various religious matters from time to time and developed a significant following of quote unquote common people. His followers began purchasing clothes from his family's men's clothing stores, which resulted in 5 stores selling out. Thus, he left the family business to become a full-time preacher. He was not formally trained in theology, nor was under the tutelage of a pastor before deciding to minister publicly to people. He was ignorant to religious doctrines in many ways, yet successful in making his followers believe that he had spiritual discernment. Never ordained nor any church affiliation, and he gave himself the title pastor. In his time, he was known to prey on the spiritually unenlightened and less fortunate. In July 1879, Russell began publishing a monthly religious magazine, Zion's Watchtower and Herald of Christ's Presence. In 1881, he co-founded Zion's Watchtower Tract Society with William Conley as president. There were many name changes of his religious society, which include the Watchtower and Tract Society, the London and Brooklyn Tabernacle, and the People's Pulpit. He ministered false prophecies to his followers, such as that the churches would begin to fall apart and that the rapture of the saints would take place in 1881. Also, he falsely prophesied the end of times would occur in 1914. Quote-unquote Pastor Russell had a lot of controversy during his time as leader of the Watchtower Tract Society. He made the false claim that the International Bible Students Association was an international organization, and it was not. At the time of that declaration, the organization wasn't even known nationwide. His wife divorced him, claiming cruelty and multiple affairs. It came out in court proceedings that he was conceited, egoistic, and domineering. Secondly, that his conduct in relation to other women was inappropriate. Inappropriate behavior included kissing and fondling other women, calling other women his wife, and locking himself in a bedroom with female house guests. His wife divorced Pastor Russell, obtaining alimony, which he did not pay, but his friends made payment to save him. He fought the case for 5 years, appealing it twice. To frustrate the courts and avoid paying his wife alimony, he changed the names of his publications to Studies in Scripture, transferred his property to corporations and societies over which he himself had absolute and complete control, and transferred the head office to Brooklyn, New York. The court said, quote, the purpose of this whole transaction was to deprive his wife of her dower interest and was a fraud upon her, end quote. He confessed to being a stockholder in Pittsburgh Asphalt Company, confessed to being the organizer of the Selig Brick Company, which he entirely managed from the Bible House on Arch Street in Pittsburgh. He also had controlling interest in the Brazilian Turpentine Company, a cemetery company in Pittsburgh, and the United States Coal and Coke Company with capital stock of $100,000. Here's more controversy surrounding Charles Russell. He was selling a crop called Miracle Wheat. He placed the discussion of the Miracle Wheat grain qualities in his monthly Watchtower to his followers, with the purpose of influencing his followers to invest in this product, which he had stock in. Selling Miracle Wheat at $60 a bushel, influencing the sick and dying to make their wills in his favor. With this Miracle Wheat, Union Bank directors and officers were engaged in an unrighteous and unlawful scheme or business with Russell by misrepresentations, fraud, and deception to obtain easy money or dishonest money or tainted money from the people. He also had a God complex. A quote taken from archive.org by a Canadian minister. Quote, if you have any doubt about the absolute truth of what I here state, look in the Watchtower for January 1st, 1912, and you will find him speaking of himself 174 times and the Lord and Master but 7 times, end quote. A Christian Zionist. The belief that Jews' national home is to be in Israel for religious and political reasons, and advocate for their return to Israel. Zionism is what is going on in the Gaza war today. There's a belief that he had Masonic ties. He used a lot of symbolism of the Freemasons, a follower of pyramidology, which refers to the various religious or pseudoscientific speculations regarding pyramids, most significantly the Giza Pyramid in Egypt. He gave a speech to a Masonic lodge in 1913, and he also had a 7-foot pyramid placed at his burial site. Here are receipts of his scamming ways. These articles were posted in the monthly newspaper called the Brooklyn Eagle in Brooklyn, New York, which was the city in which his headquarters was based in. This newspaper reported many mishandlings of Pastor Russell and his religious society, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. These clippings come from website archive.org, and I'll list it in the references at the end. The article to the left talks about Russell making false claims that Miracle Week cures cancer and his Bible Students monthly publication. The article to the right talks about Russell trying to exempt paying taxes on one of his many properties. However, he was denied by the city. More evidence of his deception. Unfortunately, he was able to influence his followers to give up their homes in preparation for end of times in 1914. I'll read a few sentences from this article in the Brooklyn Eagle. Quote, "He has also deluded thousands of followers into believing that Christ returned to the earth in 1874, though in a spirit body and therefore invisible to the natural eye. Very many have gone so far as to sell up their homes over here, expecting to die before 1914 at the latest. And many others have so arranged their affairs as last till that date only." End quote. It has been denied that Charles Russell was a Freemason. However, there's a lot of evidence that suggests otherwise. Russell delivered a speech at a San Francisco Masonic Hall in 1913, and before you was part of that speech. This information comes from the site freemasonry.bcy.ca, and it states, "Now I am a free and accepted Mason. I trust we all are, but not just after the style of our Masonic brethren." He further develops this idea. True Bible believers may or may not belong to the Masonic fraternity, but they are all Masons of the highest order, since they are being fashioned, chiseled, and polished by the Almighty to be used as living stones in the temple built without hands. They are free from sin and therefore accepted by the God of heaven as fit stones for the heavenly temple. Later in this address, Russell stated quite clearly that I have never been a Mason. This website also states this, quote, "Those who claim Russell was a Freemason quote this address out of context without noting the rhetorical imagery." Now, here's my commentary. My belief is that he was a Freemason, and this is why. When he said, "I have never been a Mason," could he be referring to not being a skilled Mason, although he was a Freemason? A skilled Mason is someone who builds structures and buildings. Freemasonry is speculative, which means that modern Freemasons use the tools and principles of skilled stone masonry as metaphors for moral and intellectual development, rather than for actual construction of buildings. Also, I find the verbiage that he uses very peculiar if he is not a Mason. For him to say, "But they are all Masons of the highest order," and also he says, "as living stones in the temple built without hands." He had to know inside information about this secret fraternity. In 1913, he wouldn't have had access to information as we do today with the power of the internet. So how was an alleged outsider so familiar with the verbiage of this secret society if he was not one of them? Ask yourself, what would a pastor's intentions be to speak to members of a secret society, and why would these San Francisco Masons be willing to have him speak if there wasn't a shared interest? Doesn't it seem odd to let an outsider speak to members of their exclusive and secretive society? Charles Russell died in 1916, buried outside of his hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 5 years after his death, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society placed a huge 7-foot-tall pyramid near his gravesite. The rumors and controversy surrounding this pyramid was that it symbolized his Masonic brotherhood, which of course has been continuously denied by this organization. It was removed in 2021 with reports of vandalism. Masons are known to follow the teachings and philosophies of ancient Egyptian mythology and heavily use ancient Egyptian symbolism. And my theory is that this pyramid is a symbol of his Masonic connection. Also, this pyramid had a cross and crown etched on it, which is another symbol used by the Freemasons. This is from Google AI. The crown and cross symbol appears in Freemasonry, specifically the Knights Templar degree. The origins of Freemasonry as a modern fraternity are traced to the early 18th century, with the first Grand Lodge being founded in England in 1717. Before the term Freemason, the organization was named Operative Stonemasons Guild, which were medieval craft organization of stonemasons, the foundation for modern Freemasonry. Over time, particularly in the 16th and 17th centuries, the focus of Freemasonry shifted from the practical skills of stonemasonry to a more philosophical and fraternal organization known as speculative Freemasonry. The central controversy of Freemasonry is that its elite members exert exclusive control over world politics and the world population. Here is J.F. Rutherford, the successor to Watchtower Bible and Tract Society fortune. Rutherford began a career in law, working as a court stenographer, trial lawyer, and prosecutor. He was also called Judge Rutherford, though he was not a practicing judge, but rather a substitute judge on one legal case, and he just kept the judge title. There are arguments that he restructured the original teachings of Charles Russell, causing many people to walk away from the Watchtower Society and form other groups. He developed an interest in the doctrines of the Watchtower Society president Charles Russell, which led him to join the Bible student movement, and he was baptized in 1906. He was appointed the legal counsel for Watchtower Society in 1907, as well as a traveling representative. On January 6, 1917, Rutherford was elected president of the Watchtower Society at their Pittsburgh convention. Bylaws passed at this convention stating the president would be the executive officer and general manager of the society, giving him full charge of its affairs worldwide. By mid-1919, about 1 in 7 Bible students had chosen to leave rather than accept Rutherford's leadership. His early presidency was marked by a dispute with the society's board of directors, in which 4 of its 7 members accused him of dictator behavior and sought to reduce his powers. Rutherford introduced many organizational and doctrinal changes that helped shape the current beliefs and practices of today's Jehovah's Witnesses. He introduced the name Jehovah's Witness in 1931 and the term Kingdom Hall for houses of worship in 1935. Rutherford was not an ordained pastor nor trained under a religious leader, just like Russell, but has changed doctrinal teachings that has shaped the current beliefs and practices of today's Jehovah's Witnesses. Rutherford was a false prophet and scammer, just like his predecessor, Charles Russell. This is a picture of a 10-bedroom mansion in San Diego, California, named Beth Sarim. It was constructed in 1929 in anticipation of various resurrected Old Testament biblical patriarchs or prophets, such as Abraham, Moses, David, Isaiah, and Samuel. In 1918, the Watchtower publication began predicting, under the direction of Rutherford, that Old Testament patriarchs or princes would be resurrected back to earthly life in 1925. Rutherford named the property Beth Sarim and dedicated it for the use of the expected Old Testament patriarchs, who were now expected to be headquartered in San Diego instead of Jerusalem. The deed for Beth Sarim, written by Rutherford, said that the property was to be held perpetually in trust for the Old Testament patriarchs and was to be surrendered to them once they arrived. And guess what? Earth's new leaders never arrived, and Rutherford took this mansion as his own residence, all expenses paid by the Watchtower Society. Walter F. Salter, the Society's former branch manager in Canada, wrote a public letter to Rutherford in 1937, claiming that Rutherford had exclusive use of luxurious and expensive residencies in Brooklyn, Staten Island, Germany, and San Diego, as well as 2 Cadillacs, and alleged that on more than one occasion he had purchased Rutherford cases of whiskey, brandy, beer, and other liquors, which he had a drinking problem. Rutherford and 7 other Watchtower executives were in prison in 1918 after charges were laid over the publication of The Finished Mystery, a book deemed rebellious for its opposition to World War I. The group was sentenced to 20 years in jail, however, released the following year with all charges dropped. One of the arrested Watchtower executive members was named Clayton J. Woodworth, a contributing writer to the publication of The Finished Mystery. While in jail, Clayton C.J. Woodworth wrote a 5-page letter addressed to an unspecified party explaining his and the other society members' experience in jail. This letter can be found on Internet Archive or archive.org, as well as a simple Google search. I'm going to point out some very telling information about the real identity of these men. The sentences to the left of this slide is from the highlighted portion at the top of the letter. Pay particular attention to the words that are highlighted and underlined in red. It is a lot of fun to belong to the tribe of Asher. It helps one to enjoy the follies of the high life of our great cities. We are all on the 3rd tier of sales. Brother Rutherford is in 9N7. Brother Vanberg is in 11N7. And I am in 24N7. Now, isn't it interesting that C.J. Woodworth identifies himself as being a part of the tribe of Asher? The tribe of Asher is one of the lost 10 tribes of Israel that supposedly is missing amongst the people of the world. Therefore, he is indirectly identifying himself as an Israelite. He also names J.F. Rutherford and other jail Watchtower Society members in his letter. These sentences come from the blue highlighted portion to the right. Pay attention to the red underlined words. At 7 to 7:55 a.m., we walk in the covered court, a mostly array. 17 of us are Negroes. There are 3 cells between Brother Rutherford and me, with Negroes in 2 of them. At 7:45, Martin Macmillan Fisher and I take a shower bath together, a rare treat. Did you see what it said? And let me read the red words again. 17 of us are Negroes. Brother Rutherford and me with Negroes. C.J. Woodworth is identifying himself as a Negro as well as J.F. Rutherford. I presume all the Watchtower Bible leaders were black men that were jailed in Brooklyn, New York, not white men. So far as this letter has stated, Woodworth identified himself as an Israelite and acknowledges that they are Negroes. We attended services Sunday morning at 9. Brother Fisher played in the absence of the regular organist. The chaplain preached at us 8. Manifestly, he did not remotely understand the first thing about his text. His talk was silly, so I just passed Job 15:2 and 3, long to the 7, and they marked Job 15:9, and sent it back, in some sense at least, to the Asherites. Again, C.J. Woodworth identifies themselves as the Asherites, one of the supposedly lost 10 tribes of Israel. The pervading narrative is that the lost tribes of Israel are missing people who don't know their identity. However, C.J. Woodworth sounds very sure of who he and the other Tract Society members are. Now back to the founder and contributor of the biblical ideologies of today's Jehovah's Witness, Charles Russell. Russell moved the headquarters of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Brooklyn, New York in 1908. And here's a small history about Brooklyn. Well before 1827, the year that slavery was abolished in New York State, Brooklyn became home to a thriving free black community. It had been a predominantly black borough until noticeable gentrification from the late 1990s to 2010. So ask yourself, does it make sense for a white man to set up his headquarters amidst a black borough, especially at that time in the early 1900s? Well, it's probable that Pastor Russell was a black man as well. The book entitled Thy Kingdom Come was published in 1914, written by Pastor Charles Russell. It explores biblical prophecy, particularly focusing on events between 1799 and 1914 and the establishment of God's kingdom. Look at the illustration underneath the title. This is the winged sun disk, which is an ancient Egyptian religious symbol. The book I mentioned earlier, The Finished Mystery, composed by Rutherford, had the same symbolism on its cover. I need to mention something before proceeding. The ancient Kemetic people and ancient Egyptians are two different groups of melanated people. The ancient Kemetic people were the original dark-skinned people of the land when the dark-skinned Egyptians invaded Kemet, now called Egypt. These Egyptians began to synchronize their deities and use the same symbols as the ancient Kemetians. So just to make it clear, the ancient Egyptians were the appropriators of ancient Kemetic symbols and culture. So this symbol is the winged disc of Amun-Ra, which is associated with divinity, royalty, and power in ancient Near East, in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Persia. Various groups such as Freemasonry, Theosophy, Rosicrucians, and Unity Church also use this symbol. Amun-Ra was a major ancient Egyptian deity named after the Libyan deity Amun. Amun-Ra is the deity that is depicted with ram's horns on the side of its head. Also, the picture before you shows a ram with an Egyptian pharaoh standing underneath its head. This deity was worshipped during the Middle Period around 2040 BCE at the Oracle Temple of Amun in Siwa Oasis, Egypt. I suspect by now that most people know that the people of the Bible were melanated people. The ancient Libyans are a part of the many groups mentioned in the Bible, the dark-skinned melanated Afro-Asiatics. Libyans were various Berber tribes that dwell mostly in North Africa. In Egypt, they lived in Siwa Oasis. The Berber tribes are the ancestors of today's Moors, who are the same bloodline as the dark-skinned melanated Israelites of the Bible. During my investigation into history, I found that the Moors, along with the Israelites, are considered Hamites, one of Noah's 3 sons. Recall Ham's sons are Canaan, Cush, Put, and Mizraim, also known as Egypt today. Not only did these Berber tribes or Hamites worship Moloch and practice human sacrifice, but they were also pedophiles, particularly lusting after young boys. I discussed this in my last YouTube video entitled The Great Reveal. Everything I'm speaking is researchable, so I encourage you to look this up yourself. The ancient Berbers and their related kin, the ancient Israelites, were and are Satanists. Yahweh is a demonic god that belonged to the ancient Canaanite pantheon. Here's information about the people who worship Moloch, Moloch, the god of the Ammonites. I'll read the underlined words on this slide. However, in ancient times, all Egypt west of the Nile was inhabited by Berbers, including the Delta and all the oases in Libyan desert. In pre-dynastic Egypt, the Berbers were the dominant population of Egypt. Their ancient gods included the Berber god Amun, adopted by the ancient Egyptians as Amun-Ra, by the Greeks as Zeus-Amun, and by the Phoenicians as Baal-Amun. The Bible states that Moab and Ben-Ami are brothers born to Lot, Abraham's nephew. Moors claim descendants from the Moabites, who worship the same type of satanic deity or god like the Ammonites. The god of the Moabites was Chemosh, who required human sacrifice just like Amun in ancient Canaan and Amun-Ra in ancient Egypt. If you look at this map, the Berber group in Siwa Oasis is just one of the dwelling areas of the Berber Amazigh tribes of northern Africa. If you look to the left of this map, you'll see Morocco, which is another area the Berbers inhabited. Today's Moors claim Morocco as their homeland, who are also identified as belonging to the Berber tribes. The Moors also claim being the Moabites from the Bible. It's a cover-up. So what does the real Pastor Russell and J.F. Rutherford look like? We may never know, and I can pretty much bet that these are not the actual names of the founder and J.W.'s secondary leader. Fake pictures to cover up the true identity of the real scammers. Black men who were stealing and preying on the less fortunate and spiritually unenlightened. These black Freemasons, Israelites, and or Moors. I promise you in this world nothing is as it seems. This cover up by our shadow government. The black elites to off-put their evil onto others who look the opposite of them. They've truly mastered the art of scapegoating. Did you know that the real identity of the DuPonts, one of the wealthiest families in the U.S. whose assets are in the billions, are a black elitist family? The DuPonts that are portrayed online are either fake pictures or white people who are pretending to be the DuPonts. And yes, I'm pretty sure that the shadow government, which is the secret government behind the scenes, are melanated people. I figured this because of the coded words that the government uses, so I propose this. What color is your shadow? The color black or dark? Hence, shadow government equaling black dark government, the black elites. Here are the references that I use, and as always, I encourage everyone to do their own independent research. Jehovah's Witness is established on corruption based on deception and greed. Followers were preyed upon losing their homes, and I can imagine many went into debt believing these false prophets were speaking divine messages. Whoever the real founders are, all I can say is that they saw an opportunity to make easy money and they took it. It is not okay for anybody to make up their own version of a holy text and then repackage it as their own truth to spread to others. Anyone who does just that is a false prophet. We are the people that make the elites and their corporations wealthy. Unfortunately, low-life beings will go to great depths to make money, even prey on people's religious beliefs. Jehovah's Witness is just one of the many religious groups who have preyed on people. This group has all the elements of a religious cult. Also, the lost tribes of Israel are not lost at all, but absorbed into the controlling elite class. The bloodline who ruled in the European monarchy, the Moors, and many other kingdoms throughout history. These are the same people who colonized America and took the land from the Aboriginal dark-skinned people in this country. I promise you nothing is as it seems. If you want to know any truths, go to the Most High yourself. We all have the ability to connect to this divine power directly. So this concludes my presentation of the hidden truth behind Jehovah's Witness. Join me for my next video revealing more truths that our government and elites don't want us to know. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, peace and blessings.